April was a terrible reading month for me, so we're very quickly going to do a wrap up and then I'm going to forget it ever happened. I don't know what happened in April. I don't know why. I just did not really like much of what I read, but that's not fun for me living it. It's not fun for me filming a wrap up. It's probably not fun for you watching. So this is gonna be a quick one today. Just quickly going over the books I read, lots of DNFs, lots of mehs, and then one book that I really loved. I DNF'd 5 books in the month of April, but I only officially count 3 of them as actual DNFs, and the other 2 were like I read the first chapter and I was like, absolutely not, I will not be interested in reading this month. The 2 that I didn't even really give much of a chance were The Marigold and Unnatural Ends. These are 2 books I've had arcs of that I've been really interested in, but I was already having a horrible reading month, and then when I was starting them, the writing style didn't click with me, and I was like, no, I can't go down this path. I'm already not enjoying books this month. I'm not going to try to force it for books that are not immediately capturing my attention. Doesn't mean these are permanent DNFs. It was just not gonna happen this month. Then for the books that I actually read a more substantial amount of and then DNF'd, the first one was The Haunting of Alejandra by the Castro. This one was just not as spooky as I was expecting it to be from the get-go. It was reading a little more like lit fic or drama about this woman who's just really struggling as a mom, and you know, I really can't blame any of the books this month. It was really me this month. So don't take any of this as a bad sign that this is a bad book. I just had a horrible month, and if it wasn't great, I was not, you know, having a good time and staying invested in the story. So that was a DNF. I also DNF'd Florida Woman by Deb Rogers, which I've been excited about for a while. This is about this woman who is coming out of prison, and she's doing this rehabilitation program by working at this like conservatory for monkeys in Florida, and wacky weird things are happening. The other people who work there are doing some kind of sacrificial stuff, and the vibes are just weird. I didn't read too much of this, probably just like 15 or 20% of it. And again, just lost my attention, and I was reading reviews and a lot of other people said it didn't even end up to be something great by the end, so DNF'd this one. And then the last one I DNF'd is the one that I read the most of and then DNF'd, and that is You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. I read half of this one. I was listening to it on audiobook. I got this one through the Libra ALC program, and it was pretty much what I was expecting it to be, but like even more mediocre than what I was expecting it to be. And also a little bit heavier on the feel of a romance book than I expected it to be. So I've only read one thing from Geneva Rose before. I read The Perfect Marriage on audiobook, and I don't think I ever actually finished that one either. I remember I was listening to that one the last time I was moving, and so I was listening to it like the whole long drive of moving from, you know, state to state, and I think I got to like the last 45 minutes or the last 30 minutes of the book, and I just arrived to my final destination, and I was like, you know what, it's not worth finishing because yeah. So I was just giving, you know, one more shot because I've seen people are pretty hyped up about this book, and I got it for free anyways through the Libra program. What the story is about is this woman who books this Airbnb, and then her host is also still there at the Airbnb. It's this man, and they're there alone, and then he's got this mysterious kind of past place, you know, there's just like mysterious things going on, and it was just not for me. Yeah, it really reads a lot like a romance book. There were a lot of things happening where I was like, in what world would a woman ever do this? But I didn't finish the book, and so I had a suspicion of the direction that it was going to go to explain why some of the things were happening. And then I saw that Gabby read it and she didn't like it, and so I was like, Gabby, please spoil this book for me. Let me know how terrible it is. And she told me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't finish that because that is even worse than I imagined it to be. So I'm glad I DNF'd this one, and I don't think I'm gonna be picking up anything else from this author in the foreseeable future. Okay, now let's talk about books that I actually did complete, starting with The Chateau. I read this in the reading vlog that I did where I swapped my TikTok time for my reading time, which was a really fun vlog. I had a lot of fun just making that and also editing it. It was just fun to put that whole project together. So if you missed that vlog, I would recommend going and checking that out. It was just a play on the videos that people do where they swap their screen time for reading time, but I did it specific to my TikTok screen time because that can be quite a lot at times. This is a story about this group of women who are all near or in their 40s at this point in life. They've been friends since they were in their 20s, and when they were in school, school. They studied abroad together in France, and they would go to one of their grandmother's house at this, you know, chateau. Now they're in their 40s and they're all going back again. The grandmother has invited all of them, and there's some suspicious circumstances as to maybe why the grandmother would have invited them all to come together now at their 40th birthday. And then it's even more suspicious because the grandma ends up dying, and then it's like, okay, who killed the grandma? Why did she want them here in the first place? And what other secrets are they all hiding from one another? This book's been compared to Lucy Foley and I think Ruth Ware, and I feel like those are perfect comparisons. Like if you like Lucy Foley and Ruth Ware, I would say check this out. I did not have the best time with it. This was a 2-star for me. I struggled a lot with the characters in this one and understanding their motives. I ultimately didn't love the direction that it went. There's another element to the synopsis that intrigued me, which is that all the women are there, and then there's this like secret Instagram account that is like posting photos of them, and it's like spooky, and you're like, oh, who's doing that? Is it someone in the group or someone else? And like the way everything just unfolded, it didn't really do it for me. Was not a favorite thriller of mine. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it. I had such a horrible reading month. Next up, another 2-star is She's a Haunting, which I was really upset about because this was my book club pick for my members book club, and I've had a pretty good track record with my book club picks so far of enjoying them quite a bit. Like they've all been 3 or 4 stars at least. And this was the first one that was just not super enjoyable. And most people didn't enjoy this one. The discussion was really interesting because we were all kind of like, oh, it just like didn't really work for us. Like we all were rooting for it. We wanted it to work for us, but it just really did not. This is a story about this young adult who is getting ready to prepare to go off to college, but she doesn't have money. And so in order to get money to go to college, she has to go stay with her father, who lives back home in Vietnam. She lives in America now, but she's going back to Vietnam to be with him for the summer because he said if she stays with him for the summer, he will help fund her college. They don't have the greatest relationship because of how he left the family, and she's struggling with a lot of coming of age things herself, which includes her feelings about not being Vietnamese enough. She's also bisexual and not really openly out with many people or really anyone at all, and just all the other general things that come with being a girl of that age. Then when she's staying with her father, creepy things start happening in the house. She's seeing ghosts, they're telling her not to eat, and she is trying to make it through the summer. Really like the idea of this book, like the setup, like the metaphor that it builds. Think it has potential. This is the author's debut, and so I'd be curious to see how their work progresses in the future. Ultimately, the book just didn't all come together for me super well. There were some things with just like the way scenes flowed between one another and chapters flowed between one another, and it just felt a little like stiff and not immersive, I guess is the best way to describe it. Also, this is a young adult horror book, and it is very young adult, which is fine. That is exactly what it's trying to be, but it was more young adult than I expected. And what I mean by that is just like the language that it was using, the way the characters talked, the insta-love aspect that comes in with the crush. I used to read more young adult horror than I have recently, so I wonder if it's just been a minute for me and it kind of shocked me because I've been out of that for a while, but it was just more like focused towards a younger audience than I was maybe anticipating, which again, not the book's fault. That's what it was trying to do. Did a good job doing that, but it just didn't work out for me. Next up, we have my buddy read for the April round of the 24-hour horror-a-thon, which was Jawbone by Kanako. I was quite nervous for this one as I saw everyone start to talk about it in the Discord before the read-a-thon came. Some people were reading it early, and a lot of people were DNFing and saying the writing was really difficult to get into, that there were a lot of metaphors, and it's just really been a book that I either hear incredible things about or I see people DNFing, so I knew it was going to, you know, be one way or the other. I actually ended up settling on a 3-star right about in the middle with this one. It's very unique and it's truly art. Like, this is a book that is art. So your experience with that is going to vary by what you're looking for in a book. If you're just looking for entertainment in the horror books that you're reading, this is probably going to be more highbrow than you're interested in. It's not totally inaccessible, but I would definitely say, like, if you're just starting to read horror books, this is not the place to start. This is pretty like highbrow, artsy, very wordy, very intricate, very interesting in the way the story is revealed to you and the pieces that you're getting. And so I appreciate all those things about it, and it had me fully intrigued the whole time. That is the thing this book did strongest for me, is it just had me intrigued. I wanted to know what happened, because the setup of this story is that you've got 3 main characters. You have 2 teen girls who are best friends, but you know something happens to make them like frenemies basically by the end. And those are Fernanda and Annalise. And then you have a teacher, Miss Clara, who works at the school. When the book begins, Miss Clara has Fernanda kidnapped and tied up, and you don't know why. And then you're just getting different pieces of the story, seeing Fernanda and Annalise's friendship. You're seeing inside Miss Clara's head before she ever came to the school, this traumatizing thing that happened to her, her experience as she's coming to the school and getting to work with all of these teens. And you're seeing Fernanda and Annalise and their friendship with the other group of friends that they have, just doing weird things. They've got this house they go to. Annalise has created this god in her mind, the white god that they worship and do rituals for, and it is just so strange. You are just trying to piece together what has happened in what order to get us to where we see in the very first chapter. It's a book a lot about desire and obsession and toxic female friendships, and also toxic mother-daughter relationships, and also the concept of whiteness, and also adolescence and how malleable we are adolescents, and how just small decisions can lead to all of these other big things happening. It's a book about a lot of things, but it doesn't serve it to you on a silver platter. Some things are more obvious than others, but this is a book that requires like going slow, sitting with it, reading up on things afterwards. There's a lot of like pop culture references. This is also from an Ecuadorian author, and this was just recently translated to English. So there's also some cultural things and nuance in the translation of the story. And again, it's like a work of art. It kind of reminds me of like Mona Awad's stories, because when I read a Mona Awad book, it's not usually a super straightforward experience. It's usually pretty weird, and I get so intrigued in the characters and the darkness that she exhibits in her stories. Like, this is a book that really looks at the darkness and the human psyche in a way that many other books do not do. Many books do this at a surface level. This one I feel like is really, really revealing, and I think that's so cool. But because of like my whole experience with the book, it's like a 3-star in my mind, because I didn't totally, you know, have the best experience with it in terms of entertainment, which is a factor for me in my ratings too. So yeah, it's a tricky one to recommend. It's going to have a more niche audience. I'm glad I read it because I was intrigued with it for a long time, and it led for some interesting discussions to see how everyone was having very different experiences with this one. Next up is The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda, which I also read in that video where I swapped my TikTok screen time for reading, so you can see my full thoughts in that vlog if you are interested. I have only read from Megan Miranda once before. It was the book that's like The Girl from Widow Hills, which I thought was just okay. I feel like the general perception of Megan Miranda's books from people who read similarly to myself is usually about like a 3-star experience. So that's what I went in expecting. I didn't expect this to be a new favorite thriller of the year for me, and it wasn't. It was a 3.5, but it was a good enough time. You know, it was a quick read. I'm not mad I read it. It doesn't feel like a waste of time, but it just wasn't necessarily something super memorable or exciting for me. The story is about this group of people who, when they were seniors in high school, they were going on this trip and they got in a car accident, and they ended up in a really scary situation, in a survival situation for a while together, and that really bonded them. And then in the future years, they decide to spend the anniversary of that incident together to help support one another, because in following years, unfortunately, some of the survivors end up committing suicide because of the trauma that they were suffering from after that incident. And so they make a pact to get together every year. And so you're following them 10 years later when they are coming back together for this anniversary. They go and they stay at this beach house every year, and there's just some weird things happening when they get together. Someone goes kind of missing, potentially. The main character is just finding some creepy things that's making her question her safety with this group. And so you're trying to understand what happened in the past that created such a traumatizing situation for them, and then what's going on in the present day and how are those connected. This book made some interesting choices. The past scenes, as you're seeing the survival situation, are told backwards. So you see like after 7 hours of the incident, and then 6 hours, and then 5 hours, and 4 hours. So you're kind of like going backwards to see what happened, which I didn't fully understand as I was reading the book, why that choice was made or what the intention was of that. But when you get to the final reveals, it makes sense why it did that, and it was pretty interesting the way that unfolded. This book also reminded me a lot of the show Yellow Jackets, which I absolutely love. And so for me, this book was kind of competing with Yellow Jackets in my mind, and it was really hard to live up to that because I think Yellow Jackets is like one of the best TV shows ever made. So yeah, I had fun with this. It was a good time, but it's not gonna be super memorable for me. Another book that was a 3.5 is Revelations, Horror Writers for Climate Action, which is edited by Sean O'Connor and features many very well-known horror authors. This is an anthology collection of short stories, and some of the authors featured in this include Gemma Amor, Clive Barker, Richard Chismar, Tanana Reeve-Dew, Philip Fracassi, Joe Hill, Stephen King, John Langan, Josh Mallerman, Adam Neville, Sarah Pinborough, Paul Tremblay, lots of big names in this one. And I was intrigued by this book because this is all about ecological horror, climate related things, and the proceeds of this book support a charity for climate action, which I thought was great. I was intending on doing a dedicated vlog for this one that was going to come out on Earth Day. It was a whole thing that I was excited about, but I was not loving it for the first couple of stories, and I didn't want to put out a vlog where I'm like, I don't like this story, 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 this one's okay, I don't like this story. And so I decided instead to just update on my Instagram stories as I was reading this one, and after I got through the first couple stories, I started enjoying them a lot more, and I had some good standouts from this collection, which made me feel a lot better. Out of all of these stories, I kind of separated into which ones I liked and which ones I loved. As for the authors whose stories I liked in this, those included Stephen King's, John Langan's, Sarah Pinborough, Priya Sharma, and Paul Tremblay. And out of those authors, the only one I haven't read from before is Priya Sharma, so I would be interested to see more from them in the future. And then out of the stories in this that I loved, those included Tanana Reeve-Dew, Philip Fracassi, Tim Leben, and Josh Mallerman. And out of that list, I have never read from Philip Fracassi before or Tim Leben, and so that makes me really excited to find some stories from them as well, which is what I think is fun about anthologies too, is you get to visit some stories from authors who you already know that you love, and you get to be introduced to some new people and see if you like their writing style, if you think their story ideas are cool, and if you might want to go check out more books from them in the future. I have not read many anthologies yet, and I haven't had any really incredible experiences from anthologies that feature a lot of different authors. I have had good experiences of anthologies from all the same author. So I read Autumn Crow by Cameron Chaney, and I loved that. I read A Sliver of Darkness by C.J. Tudor, and I loved that. But when I read these collections that include a lot of different authors, it's just harder to be fully satisfied. But I would call it a win, and I call it a success when I find some new authors that I want to go read some of their stuff, and when I get to enjoy some stories from authors that I already knew I liked. Speaking of anthology collections where all the stories are from the same author, I didn't even do this on purpose, but the next book that I have is Be Very Afraid of Kanako Inuki by Kanako Inuki. This is a manga that is a collection of 6 short stories, I think there are in here, and I have never heard anything about this before. I've never seen it before, I've never heard of it before, but I was at my bookstore and I saw this on a shelf and I said, what is that? That intrigues me because I'm trying to find some more mangas to pick up that are just standalone experiences, because I'm trying not to read a lot of manga series that have like 20 volumes in them, because I know I'm gonna want to buy them all, and then it's like, then they're gonna sit on my shelves, and for what reason? Because I will read them one time and never look at them again. So I'm really trying to look for different types of manga to continue exploring that aren't necessarily these huge volume stories, or even if they have like an omnibus version, I feel like that's even easier for me. But yeah, I'm just looking for more like individual things to pick up. So if you have any recommendations for that, or any that are like shorter, like if it's only like 3 to 5 volumes, that's fine for me too. Let me know down below, especially if they are horror or thriller. That's really what I'm looking for. And so this intrigued me because it was just, you know, something you pick up, you read the 6 stories, and then you're good to go. That was it. That was the whole experience. And I thought this was pretty fun. There were also little pieces in here that I liked that were just like little highlights from the author. Like at the end, you see this list of their top 5 mangas that changed their outlook on life, and then it's like manga recommendations. There's one in here that's like their favorite horror movies. And generally, I just really liked the look of this. Like every story started with this really pretty page that I thought was really cool. And I really liked the art style and it was just a fun time. The back also lists some other people that they've been very inspired by, and I have read from Junji Ito before, but that's the only other one on the list. So now I'm like, do I need to go check out some stuff from them as well? I'm still relatively new to manga. I've just really read Junji Ito and then Spy Family. So yeah, I'm just open to exploring more. I thought this was a good, fun time, and I especially love that it was just something quick to pick up and I don't have to go buy 19 other books after this. And then finally, the one single book that I loved this month, the only thing that gave me hope that I do enjoy reading, was Signed Here by Claudia Lux. And this was actually one of the first books that I read this month, and then everything was downhill from here. I've been hearing about this book for a while. I've had it on my shelves for as long as it came out with Book of the Month, which was October of 2022. And I've just kind of put it off because I haven't really heard anyone put it in like their top 10 favorites of the year. It just seemed like something that I would enjoy, but I didn't know if it would be overly unique or like as amazing as I wanted it to be. It was just like something that was kind of sitting on my shelves. I was like, I'll get to it when I get to it. And this was the month I decided to get to it, and I'm so glad I did because I loved it. I had such a good experience with this book. I thought it was just so original, so witty, so fun, and I just loved everything about it. Also, I apologize if you can hear the crows outside. They've been driving me nuts lately. I don't know what they're doing in my yard, but I really wish they would go because they are so loud. But anyways, you probably know what this book is about because I feel like everyone has read it by this point, or at least is familiar with the concept of it. But in case you haven't, it is a story about this guy who is working in hell, who is trying to get people to sign their souls over to go to hell as well. And the more people he gets, the more likely he is to get a promotion and, you know, do better at his job. It's very corporate style hell. And then you're also following this family on Earth, the Harrison family. In particular, he's got some connections to like watching them and trying to get some more people from that family recruited. So you get two very different feeling types of stories because the hell landscape is very satirical and a little bit, you know, magical because it's set in hell, and that's just very not the real world. And then you have the real world setting, which just feels kind of like a family drama. They're going on vacation together. They've all got secrets from one another. There's a lot of morally gray characters, and I just loved it. I love the characters. I love the story, the pacing, where it went, the tone, the writing. It was just such an enjoyable read. And I believe this was this author's debut, and so I am very, very excited to see what she does in the future. Very, very excited to read another book from her, and I am so glad that I had at least one success from this month. One more thing to mention before we wrap up is I am also reading Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. I have gotten halfway through this one so far, and I was intending on completing it this month, but I have just ran out of time. But as I mentioned in my April TBR video, I am planning on doing a dedicated reading vlog for this. I'm already in progress with it, and I'm not hating this book, thankfully. I'm having a good time with it. So I do think that reading vlog will be able to come out because I will be able to say good things about it, which is my barometer for if I put out a dedicated vlog at this point. So you can expect to see a vlog on this within like the next 2-ish weeks once I finish this book up. But yeah, just wanted to give an update on that in case you were looking out for that. That should be coming very soon. So that's it for all the books that I read this month. I genuinely hope you had a much better reading month than I did. I don't know what was in the air. I don't know what was on my shelves. It was just not a super great month for me. So let me know if you had any good reads this month down in the comments below, and let me know if you've read any of these books that I talked about as well, and especially if you've read any of the ones that I didn't love and you have good things to say about them. That would be wonderful to see in the comments below. So if people are checking out this video and they were excited about these books, they can see that other people enjoyed them. I just really did not have a great month. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!